With the gunners atop the Humvees and their sights aimed on Joe and I, Major Jackson told us to drop all our weapons, including the 2 fully automatic rifles that belonged to his unit. I looked over at Joe, and he nodded his head to me, almost reassuring me it's okay to comply to the command. 2 men accompanying Major Jackson patted and checked us for weapons. He asked if it was just us inside, as he sent a team inside to clear the building. Joe told me, let him do the talking, and answered yes, it was just him and I. We ran across 3 insurgents who were impersonating United States Army personnel. 2 were terminated out back on the loading dock, and as you see, sir, the 3rd lays before us. Major Jackson said his group was from Fort Drum, home in the 10th Mountain Division. I was familiar with Fort Drum, but Joe lived it. He spent 8 out of his 10 years as an active-duty infantryman stationed there. It was named after Lieutenant General Hugh A. Drum, commander of the 1st Army in World War II. It was established in 1907, expanded, and named Camp Drum in 1951, redesignated Fort Drum in 1974, and became home of the 10th Mountain Division in 1984. Before Armageddon started, it had over 19,000 active-duty personnel. Joe told Major Jackson he was stationed there and proudly served on the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, serving on deployments to Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom while he served. Joe pulled out his Army dog tag that had his name, social security number, blood type, and religious views on one side. On the back, it said 2nd Brigade Combat, Fort Drum, New York, 2001-2010. When Joe left the 2nd Brigade to start a life outside of the service after meeting his wife, he was a senior lieutenant that was selected to be the executive officer of a 140-member personnel-sized unit. Joe had met his wife while he was enlisted and proposed to her on Christmas Eve of 2009, her favorite holiday. He loved serving his country, but after 10 years of seeing action overseas that included horrible scenes and images, he wanted a normal life now. Little did he, or any of us know, 6 years after he got out, there would never be a normal life for any of us again. Finding out Joe was former infantry eased some of the tensions that weighed heavily on the current situation. Major Jackson's team reemerged from inside the Walmart saying all clear, but there was bad news. The 3 dead bodies of Smith, Grant, and Edwards had been located on the northwest perimeter of the building, stripped of their clothes and gear. Major Jackson said the 3 had been sent out to scout this location 2 days ago. He and the remaining members of his platoon were stationed at the county hospital 3/4 of a mile up the road. Shortly after the 3 departed, the hospital was invaded by foreign soldiers. A deadly battle played out over the next 18 hours. Major Jackson's team sustained heavy casualties, losing 10 members of his group in the fight. Russians, I asked, sir? Yes, that is correct, he replied. We fought them off, killing 18 of them before the final group retreated north back up Route 19. We heard gunfire from this location today, and after not being able to contact my men, we came to investigate. Luckily, they arrived just in time to see Joe execute the final insurgent at the front door, clearing us of any responsibility in the deaths of the 3 soldiers. I said, we're fighting back and we're going to win this thing, right? Not so fast, the major interjected. What do you mean, sir? I asked. After the initial EMP was successfully launched and detonated, there were coordinated attacks on our 5 largest military bases in the country. Fort Bragg, Fort Campbell, Fort Hood, Joint Base Lewis McChord, and Fort Benning. Between the 5 bases, there were over 1.5 million men and women of the armed forces stationed between them. Rough estimates suggested 60% of them did not survive. Then came the nuclear attack on Washington, D.C., that eradicated the majority of the government. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea created this opportunity to settle old scores and eliminate the world of the greatest military power in the United States. Israel had nuked Damascus after Hezbollah coordinated attacks on Tel Aviv using stolen bioweapons. The Middle East was now a ring of fire as all hell had broken loose over there. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea now called themselves the four countries of the apocalypse, referring to the last book of the New Testament of the Bible, called the Book of Revelation of Jesus Christ, to John of Patmos. The chapter tells of a book or scroll in God's right hand that is sealed with 7 seals. The Lamb of God opens the first 4 of the 7 seals, which summons 4 beings that ride out on white, red, black, and pale horses. The 4 riders are often seen as symbolizing conquest, war, famine, and death. The 4 countries' vision is set to bring divine apocalypse upon the world now. Major Jackson said the fate of our country now depends on what remains of our military, our neighbors to the north, Israel, South Korea, Australia, Japan, France, Germany, and what's left of the UK, who is still reeling from the effects of the EMP that struck them minutes after the US was hit. I knew that we were up Schitt's Creek, but listening to Major Jackson describe it was beyond disheartening. He told us less than 40% of our military equipment was equipped to withstand an EMP. Military leaders had been fighting and lobbying with the current administration for years to increase military spending to be able to do so. Unfortunately, it had fallen on deaf ears and was now too late. Joe and I had originally feared the Major could be an imposter or nuisance of some kind. There were soldiers, or some semblance of them, for the marauders to have executed, so a genuine American force operating on the ground so close to our camp was plausible. However, a Russian operative who spoke impeccable English could be the front man for a search and destroy mission disguised as Americans and using captured American hardware. The other possibility, the Major is himself a marauder with captured American hardware. The fourth possibility that crossed our mind, he's militia and either elected by his unit to the rank of Major, or he's a former retired Major who has formed up a new unit or reformed a shattered unit. Joe had questioned what a Major was doing running a patrol so small. It would normally be a higher ranked NCO or very junior officer at most running a patrol like this. But then again, times are anything but normal in this new world. From what he had told us, his forces have dwindled, and he's short on junior officers and senior NCOs. Major Jackson was out doing training with the 10th Mountain Division back on July 19th, with a group of over 100 members near the Adirondacks. Fort Drum initially escaped the coordinated attacks across the country on our military bases. As his team prepared to return back, he had received comms that Fort Drum was gone, completely flattened, burned to the ground. Thousands upon thousands dead from a biological attack. The Geneva Protocol no longer mattered and was ignored by the enemy. The treaty prohibiting the use of chemical and biological weapons in international armed conflicts that was signed in Geneva back on June 17th of 1925 held as much value now as paper currency did. His team that was initially 116 members had now been reduced to 18 after losing 3 more here at Walmart. An astonishing 85% loss in numbers was shocking. They had been involved in major conflicts in Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, and a small town in rural southern New York. With each side gaining trust in another, Major Jackson asked what our current situation was. Joe told him we were on a supply run. We had a group member who was less than 8 weeks away from giving birth, and we were ill-equipped to handle that situation. We have a camp set up about 4 miles due south down the road. How many members? Major Jackson questioned. 31, sir, I answered. We need supplies to help get us through the winter, I said. Joe asked if there was any medicine readily available at the hospital they were set up at. Not much, Lieutenant, Major Jackson answered. It had been over 6 years since anyone had called Joe that. When we arrived there 6 days ago, there wasn't much left, except for a 9-member group of vagrants that had taken up residency in there. Mostly all addicts who were scavenging pills and medicine to maintain feeding their addiction. They no longer have an addiction to feed, if you know what I mean, Major Jackson said. My group could use 2 men like yourselves helping to defend our country. Other units across the state and country were banding together ragtag groups of militiamen to help fight the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There were no more background checks and basic training to join the United States military. You would take an oath now and join your brothers and sisters to help the depleted numbers they were facing. I'll make you an offer, Major Jackson said. You join the 10th Mountain Division, and I can get supplies airdropped into your group monthly. Food, water, medical, things to help your group survive the upcoming winter, until you can start growing food come spring. Think about what I'm offering. A chance for your group to survive and live to see another year. I tell you what, we will help you empty and load up the supplies, anything that we can find in this Walmart. We'll help deliver them back to your camp and propose this offer to everyone there. Any able-bodied person will be welcomed with open arms to join us, fight with us, and live to see another day.